Welcome to High Agency, igniting conversations with inspiring people, leading transformative change. The ability to bridge the gap between technology and business is more crucial than ever. In recent reports, we see that 70% of digital transformations fail, often due to a lack of communication between tech teams and business leaders. This disconnect isn't just costly, it's a massive missed opportunity. But what if we could cultivate leaders who speak both languages fluently? Imagine the potential when someone can not only envision groundbreaking technologies, but also translate that vision into tangible business outcomes. In the startup ecosystem, this blend of skills is particularly vital. We're talking about an environment where startups don't die, they commit suicide. And why? It's often due to a lack of market need or running out of cash. The ability to secure funding and validate product market fit can quickly mean the difference between success and becoming another statistic. Moreover, in an era where diversity drives innovation, we're seeing a shift in the landscape. Women-led startups, despite receiving only 2.3% of VC funding, have been found to generate 10% more in cumulative revenue than their male counterparts. But beyond the numbers, there's an intangible quality that sets truly exceptional leaders apart. It's their ability to inspire, to see potential where others see obstacles, and to turn setbacks into stepping stones. So today, we're going to explore these themes through the lens of someone who's lived them. From overcoming personal challenges to navigating the complex world of tech startups, our guest's journey offers valuable insights into what it takes to succeed in today's evolving business landscape. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Mehrsa Raeiszadeh, who was named the 2022 Woman of the Year in Canada by Bay Street Bull and 40 Under 40 by Business in Vancouver. Mehrsa is a trailblazing entrepreneur and technologist. As co-founder of MintList, she secured $1 million in committed annual revenue pre-launch and raised over $10 million in 2 years. Overcoming challenges as a woman in Iran, mastering ADHD, and breaking national swimming records, Mehrsa completed her Ph.D. at Georgia Tech in just 3 years with over 20 publications and patents, and she's known for bridging the gap between technology and business. Mehrsa now focuses on helping startups secure non-dilutive funding and mentoring as an entrepreneur in residence at New Ventures BC, Yale, and Futurpreneur. Welcome, Mehrsa.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, growing up, I am just so happy that our parents weren't friends. Because I think my parents would have just pointed at you and been like, why can't you be more like this person? Look at everything she's doing.
You're too kind.
But you've got a long list of achievements here. And, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit because you're working in Vancouver as an entrepreneur in residence. You're mentoring other startups. You're involved in startups of your own. But there's a whole sort of pre-journey because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think your plan was necessarily Canada or to land in Vancouver and to be doing this. Perhaps you started life with different dreams and different ambitions. So let's maybe start there. Why a PhD was it in microelectronics or what was your education?
Microelectromechanical systems, like subsection of microelectronics. Yeah.
Okay. So, why that PhD? Why that path to education? What led you there? And why do you leave it behind? I'm sure a lot of it still stays with you, right? But you didn't pursue research necessarily or direct research. So, what brought you to that point? And then why'd you leave it behind and get into the world of entrepreneurship?
So when I finished my bachelor's in Iran, I went to the States for grad school. After I finished my master's, I was done. Like I said goodbye to my teachers. I was like, yeah, this is great. And then I attended my sister's graduation ceremony. She did her PhD at Georgia Tech as well, electrical engineering. Mm-hmm. And she was one of the honored students that they get up and everybody claps for. And I looked at my parents and this proud face, like true happiness, that's shining through the eyes. And I was like, I'm going to recreate that experience for you. And right there, I promised myself I'm going to do my PhD in 3 years, 4 GPA and 20 publications. And I had to do it because I was like, if I don't respect my own words, I can't expect other people to respect my words. So that's how I ended up doing my PhD at Georgia Tech in microelectronics. And one of my sister's PhD advisors became my PhD advisor. Mm-hmm. One of the most influential people I've ever had in my life. And then after my PhD, like in microelectronics and MEMS, usually like the work that I did, micro-electromechanical systems, the natural path is to go to like Intel or IBM of the world. Like, but I was in the States with a international student visa, as an Iranian chemical engineer. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, when I interviewed with Intel, they told me they wouldn't be able to hire me because I didn't have a green card or like citizenship status. So I ended up joining a chemical company because my PhD was in chemical engineering, like microelectronics under the chemical engineering department. It was a technology innovation leadership that they recruited me for, like 9 of us globally, I think. That was quite an experience too. So I'm glad I did it.
So it's an interesting thing when sometimes I guess things don't work out the way you expected, but it leads to a different path because I'm sure that there's a lot of your contemporaries that were probably moving on to jobs at large chip manufacturers. And so that kind of created a constraint that maybe, I guess, forced you into getting creative and finding a different path. So when you joined that company, what was your trajectory there? And then, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, even to that point, it still seems like there's a leap that you took to get to Vancouver, right? So when did you take that leap and why?
I was working in the States for that company, Technology Innovation Leadership Program. So it's they rotate you through different R&D divisions of the company. Mm-hmm. So 8 months. And then for the last one, I had one of the VPs of R&D fly to Blacksburg, Virginia. That's when I was one of my my second rotation was. And this VP of R&D flew there and with a crew, and they came like to see me. I was like, I'm a recent graduate. What's happening? I'm a recent PhD. And then he came and he talked to me. He was like, tell me about your experience with sales and influencing people to buy something, to be able to have like this repeatable sales cycle. I'm like, sorry, I think you got the wrong person. My PhD was in microelectronics. I have no idea what you're talking about. He was like, have you ever sold anything? I'm like, no. I tried to sell the idea of becoming a lifeguard to my dad one summer, and he just said, how much are you going to get paid? I'll pay more, just don't do it. So anyways, he came to recruit me for doing my last rotation at the headquarters, doing it in the headquarters for a project for the CTO of a company. This is like a multi-billion dollar revenue company. And it was like the CTO wants to do a project that bridges the gap between sales and marketing and R&D to be able to replicate the success stories that they have for specific products or business lines. And they've identified that there's a gap in communication between the techie people and business people. And they thought I could be that translator. So they were like, would you fly to Dallas with us? So I was like, this person flew to Dallas with them and went on this journey. And that was like the last step before I moved to Canada.
Wow. Yeah, we don't actually always give credit to the importance of that role. Like I was living in California in the early 2000s when I first encountered a role called sales engineer, right? And it was odd to me because at that time I was working in software engineering. So I was working with developers, we're on the tech side, and sales and marketing was always a different division. But because of the nature of the solution, they had this really interesting role. And I think it was the most polite way of saying that any of their developers or architects that had a personality were promoted to these positions of sales engineer. It's like you get to be client facing because you're not going to scare anybody, right? And the sales engineer role was actually critical in that firm because we were, doing solutions that were integrating with companies like HP, Disney, you name it. But you need somebody that had the depth of technical knowledge, quick on their feet, but also were able to translate, that technical knowledge into very business or operational terms, essentially to take some of the hostility out of, what can otherwise be very, technical jargon, right? And I don't think it's a role that we necessarily give as much credence to as necessary. But obviously somebody saw that in you because they said, okay, we have somebody here who's got a lot of the engineering and technical mastery, but there's something going on with her such that she can be promoted to actually be facing people and bring some of her personality out. But you seem to have actually leaned into that quite a bit, right? Because I could be wrong, but I feel like you're doing less electromechanical engineering these days than you are meeting people, crafting ideas, shaping new ventures. But you're in a very people-oriented realm these days.
Very true. I think that was the second time I got to see where technology and business comes together and it makes magic happen. Mm-hmm. The first time it was during my Ph.D. My Ph.D. was a true businessman, like a brilliant person out of like Bell Labs that like really brought together technology and business, and I got to witness it.
Your PhD advisor?
My PhD advisor.
Okay.
Dr. Cole. And then during that rotation at Celanese was the second time I saw that. I was like, this is magical. Like if you get these people to talk together effectively and speak the same language, magic happens. It's just like a diamond mine. It's just like so much in there that you can discover and you can bring out. So I fell in love with it. And since then, everything that I've done since that rotation, it was always at the cross section of technology, business, and people. I love that triangle. And I think every business needs it. Otherwise, how can you survive as a tech startup or tech business? Yeah,
absolutely. And so that's basically where your love of entrepreneurship was born? Was the first time you were seeing business, tech, and people come together in some meaningful ways?
I didn't know how to spell entrepreneurship when I was in the States, by the way. I moved to, I was traveling after I finished my rotational program at Celanese. I was like, you know what? I was go-go since I was 5. Like I broke the fridge in our house because I was ADHD. I climbed up to get a jar of like jam, fell, and my parents were like, you go swim as much as you can till we're going to
get all the energy out of you.
Get all the energy out of you. And then I was go-go. They put me in swimming. I broke the national record and then studying and all that. And I was always go-go. I'm going to take a year off and I'm going to travel the world. I was on my, I was driving from Houston to Austin to start my year journey. And my dad, and I called my parents proud that I quit my job. I'm going to like go travel the world. I'm done. And they were like, my dad was like, don't you have parents? Why Austin? Why not Vancouver? I was like, well, I was starting my, my trip. And anyways, Iranian parents turned around, went to the airport, flew to Vancouver. First night at the party that I went to, I met the co-founder of Recon Instruments, one of the co-founders. And he introduced me to this startup that was doing something. The process was similar to what I did during my PhD. Because they're struggling with scaling up their technology. Can you take a look? And I was like, I think I can help. And that's where my genes got crooked. And I got into the entrepreneurship world and left the beautiful.
That's where the mutation happened right there.
Mutation happened. But that's how I joined the entrepreneurship community of Vancouver and Canada. I wasn't planning on moving here.
No, I mean, it doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like it at all.
It was supposed to be a year trip that started in Vancouver and ended right there.
Wow. I mean, there's a fair amount of serendipity in your story, right? But there's also obviously being ready for those opportunities. So this initial startup that you joined then, I imagine that if there was some spark of entrepreneurship that kind of got started in the States, this probably just continued fanning that flame, right? Because what happened in this conversation was you went to a party, met somebody interesting who was doing interesting things. They presented a problem, and it was the curiosity of the problem that probably, initially attracted you. So is that a startup that you actually joined? Did you continue as an advisor, or what was your role there?
I joined as the first employee. I ended up paying some of my salary at some point for some of the grants and stuff we had. I was the first employee. And then we won the first place New Ventures BC. Money started flowing in. And then we're finding product market fit at the very end.
What was the startup?
Microdermics. It was a microneedle technology for drug delivery and biosensing.
We should have talked more before this podcast because Microdermics is a past client of ours.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the initial brand, we helped launch that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's a Skyrocket client. I had no idea. So.
Oh my gosh, that's why your name is so familiar.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi. That beautiful branding, the thing with the 3 dots.
Yeah.
That was your work. I told you I'm Dory. Dory from Finding Nemo. That's me. Yeah, that's where it's coming from. Yeah. That was beautiful branding, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I mean,
fantastic. I loved it.
It was a fantastic technology. We'll just spend half an hour here just complimenting each other about the great work that we do.
The co-founder of one of the co-founders, Sahan, actually started doing another startup based on that because we pivoted from drug delivery to biosensing at the very end. And it was beautiful, fantastic opportunity. But there were some, things behind the scenes that happened, behind the closed doors with the board that happened and the content company didn't continue. But Sahan actually continued it with his startup.
Incredible.
So I know he launched something else with it and he seems to be doing pretty well. Yeah. Maybe he needs you with your branding work.
Oh, hey, I'd love to talk to him. We were very passionate about the company and loved the technology because I'm a bit of a sci-fi and Star Trek person myself. So on the show, they had these things called hypo sprays, right? Where you don't insert a needle, you just go psst, and like something gets injected into a person. So for me, it was realizing these kind of very sci-fi, technologies that I found fascinating, right? So it was a fun brand to work on. It was a very cool group. But yeah, I mean, a lot of innovation happening in the city that we don't realize sometimes. And in very close quarters.
Yeah, I love what they did. I remember when I joined, we weren't able to inject into the skin yet. So the microneedle couldn't inject. And I remember when we actually got it and we built one that we could insert into the human skin, we were working on dead human skin, right? And I was like, I wonder if this works in human. And while Sahan was thinking, I was like, oh, it works. He was like, just inject yourself. I hope no one from Health Canada's listen to the podcast, but yes. It was really nice to see it working. It was just like sci-fi movies.
And hey, once in a while you gotta violate some research protocols, right? You gotta make things happen.
Talk about it. Company's not around
anymore. So Microdermics, that's fascinating. So what happened after Microdermics?
One of my investors actually recruited me out. And that's how I got into consulting. Then I started consulting for some startups, and I knew I wanted to do my own startup. And I can tell you why. But I knew I wanted to do my own startup. So I was looking for a business plan that resonated with me. And a friend of mine knew that I was in the tech scene. He knew I was itching to build something. He passed on his business plan to me. He said, hey, Mehrsa, I wrote it 3-4 years ago. I think 2020 would be a good year to start working on it. It was December 2019 when we met. And then early 2020, he was like, I think this year would be a good year to bring this to market or start working on it. And that's how I picked up the business plan of MintList. I looked at it, I was like, you know what? I would use it. I would use this service. I would totally use it. And that's how it started on MintList.
Wow. And so talk to me about MintList. What was that journey like? Going from 0 to 1, right? Of having the idea literally on paper of something that's describing a business idea. But you and I both know that the idea is 10% of it, right? 90% is execution, the people you bring together, the rest of it, the other parts of that triangle, right? So what was it like going from 0 to 1 on MintList and actually building something and getting it launched?
Painful, exciting, rewarding. It's just when you're having a baby and you're delivering a baby, like there's a baby coming out of you and that's your business. I think it's beautiful when you see, okay, there's a 40-page business plan scratched up with different pens and different colors. And then you look back and you're like, I built a business around this. And there were people transacting on it. And you have 5-star reviews from all these people, like hundreds of people. The thing is, it's so rewarding that makes it worthwhile with all the pain, with all the hard work, with all the sacrifices you got to make. And I think we sacrifice the overly used word in the startup world, but
it's just what you do.
It's the only way to do it.
Yeah. So just to give
me.
Yeah, of course. But just to give a bit of an introduction, so MintList is a marketplace for used vehicles. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you have there wasn't like an automotive passion here. It was more so the opportunity and the passion around solving a problem that was curious to you. I think a lot of times in entrepreneurship, the norm is that there's always going to be challenges you're trying to solve. And when you come to that with a lot of technical knowledge and background, you've got the tools to be solving the technical challenges. But what did you learn from this experience though, right? Like, what did you learn about entrepreneurship? What was new beyond just the technical challenge of, we have an idea, how do we get it to market?
That's a great question. We did not practice this at all. What did I learn? I think I really felt everything is about people. I really learned the book Good to Great. I felt it every step of the way. I felt the need for the book Good to Great. I felt the need to read the book, that I should have read the book Scale Up when one of my pre-seed investors gave me the book. And it was by my nightstand 4 months before he said, did you read it? And I said, no. And then we actually bought it for everyone in the company. Maybe a little bit too late. But what did I learn? A lot. Every day is learning. Because if you're not learning, you're not growing, because the business is growing. The business grows so fast. 0 to 1 is like a baby. Every day the baby learns something. The business is growing every day. And if as a leader, as an operator, as a co-founder, if you're not learning every day and you're not growing, the business is going to outgrow you.
Yeah.
So there's going to be so many things that I've learned that I can share with you. Just tell me which one I can talk.
Well, no, what was interesting to me was because the previous situations you described, it's like, either you were kind of coming into an existing situation, or there's a company, or there was already some formation that happened and you were coming in to solve a problem. But this really seems like it was yours, right? Like this was, you were maybe taking a model that somebody had put together, and there's a lot of assumptions on that model that probably proved true, probably many that proved wrong. But this was really your ownership for the first time. Is that fair to say?
It is. It was the first time that I co-founded the business from scratch and ground up. So yeah, it was mine.
And so that, we had talked about what life looks like when you found something, when you're involved in startup and entrepreneurship in general. But what I'm always curious to understand is what motivates that, right? Because yes, there's, an interesting problem to solve there. But there's lots of businesses that have interesting problems to solve, right? There's large enterprises that are implementing all sorts of complex, technological solutions maybe. There's no shortage of things to be done in the world. And you'd mentioned that you want to get into spaces where you're solving some unique problem, or you're bringing something unique to it. So what is the unique thing that attracts you, and what is the unique thing that you think you're bringing to the companies you're working with today?
So let me answer the question of what interested me in MintList. And there were so many different startups that I was looking at, so many different problems I could solve. And I'm industry agnostic, right? So I could take on any of the business plans that came towards me as far as the operations goes. The reason I chose this one, a few reasons. Microdermics, we missed the big opportunity in biosensing. So it was that product market fit, right? We really, a bunch of PhDs came together. We perfected the technology, and then we started trying to place it. And at the very end, we found that potential product market fit. So the product market fit was one thing for me. The other one, so that comes from the industry experience, that industry knowledge, right? So that was what's missing at Microdermics for me. So when I looked at Mintlist business plan, my co-founder, Mike, he had 30 years of experience on the auto industry. He was the first Canadian president of the National Vehicle Listing Association in the States and won a bunch of awards and been there, done that, like serial entrepreneur. So he had that industry experience. And then product market fit was a question to solve based on my past experience. So that's how we got to $1 million committed AIR, because I was like, hey, you give me a problem, I'll solve it. You tell me get to the moon, I either build a rocket or I grow wings and I will fly and I will get to the moon. But I need to make sure there is something on that moon. So that's how we started signing up the dealers before we wrote a stitch of code to get to that 1 million committed AIR. So that was the other one, was product market fit.
And so that was the lessons you'd learned from Microdermics.
Lessons that I learned from Microdermics.
Because I'd argue there, you guys flew to the moon. But then you looked around and said, hey, where's all the people?
And then the other piece was culture. When I was at Microdermics, my sense of ownership, have you read the book, The Amazon Way?
No.
So their leadership principles, one of the key leadership principles of Amazon that they hire people for, and that's how the culture, and then they run the business based on those, is ownership. And reading that book, I was like, oh my gosh, my number one attribute is my sense of ownership. Anything I do, my sense of ownership is 120%. And it doesn't have a dial for me to dial it down. So either do something or I don't. So when I was at Microdermics, I was all in. I wasn't a co-founder, but I was all in, and I was putting my heart and soul into it. And I remember when things were getting tough, the things behind the closed doors, I was like a bird that was in a cage. I was like hitting the walls. I was like, you should do this. Like, why are we not looking at this? This is so obvious to me. Like 10 steps down the chessboard, I was like, this is so obvious. This is like a very obvious pattern to me. Why are we not doing this? And I remember one of the co-founders looked at me and he said, this is not even your startup. Why do you care so much? And at that point, I felt something like a lamp, like a light that turns off. It turned off inside of me. And I felt something broke inside of me. And at that moment, I said, I'm going to do my own startup. And I'll make sure everybody thinks they own a piece of that company. And their sense of ownership is going to be equal or more than me. And that's the way I'm going to do it. And when I partnered, like when Mike proposed this business plan to me, I felt he was a person I could build that culture with. And he really accepted me for who I was. And coming from a culture of Iranian culture, which is so judgmental, it was such a breath of fresh air for me, so refreshing, that I was like, wow, I can be who I am, and it's fine. And I don't have to have like this book on my head that my dad does when I was 25, like walk straight, right, good posture. So all of that came together, and I looked at the business plan, and I sold my car, and I had a terrible experience, buying it and selling it. And I was like, I have a PhD, I'm smart, I can solve problems, but I have such a terrible time buying and selling cars. So other people must have this problem too. So it was a combination of things.
The ownership part's interesting because we have some parallels here. When I was early career and I was like working, various jobs right out of school, some of them were tech roles and, some of them weren't. But I would enter a company and I would literally like look around and start like figuring out what my role was. But much like yourself, I'm either in or out. And when I'm in, it meant like I was literally making decisions and walking and talking as if I owned the place. And whenever I had the right boss or mentor. They knew how to kind of cultivate that and shape that. They knew how to engage me properly. And when I didn't, one of two things happened. It's like either, there was a period of exploitation where I was like throwing myself at the role, and they were actually just like squeezing me for everything I was worth, right? And this is when you're super young and you don't know, right? You don't have the experience yet. Or there was instances where it was a little bit about, closer to what you're describing, where I was getting looked at almost suspiciously of like, why are you acting like this, right? Why are you behaving like this? And those were cases where actually, that the sense of ownership you bring to the role, it wasn't appreciated in the same way. So for the most part, I think, personally, I maintain that sense of ownership, but it's not a surprise that I would at some point in life go out and take the experience I had first in advertising, then, first in technology, then in advertising, and put that together in a digital agency, because you want to feel like you actually are able to you have the latitude, right? You have the power to make the decisions and shape your own destiny, right? And that part of your story actually really resonates with me, because I feel like that ownership that you have with the right team members, it has very little to do with share structure or equity or anything like that. Because even somebody that has a high degree of ownership, to a large extent, they're doing it for themselves, right? And what I mean by that is like, it's not just a selfish interest, but it's about how they're going to show up, right? You want to show up in a certain way. You want to feel meaningful and effective. And as a result, you're willing to take on the responsibility. You're willing to take on the accountability, and you're passionate, and you're happy to, push an agenda in that company if you think it's going to help in some meaningful way, right? And that's been a pretty, I feel, consistent thread in your life, is what you described with your education and your roles after that. It was about whatever you're going to do, you were going to go at really, really hard. There was a little anecdote, and I just want to touch on this just because it was a cool and very interesting story. But you mentioned very briefly that you were like a national swimming champion. So was that in Iran or in the States?
In Iran.
Okay. So you obviously brought a fair amount of like tenacity to whatever you're doing, whether it's studies or swimming or what have you. But early life is like so critical in shaping who we are and what we turn out as. And you also referenced your parents. You referenced answering to your dad, which we've all done. And in my case, my mother. And you also mentioned your words, not mine, the judgment of an Iranian community. So what was life like in Iran, and like how were you able to sort of navigate having this real drive and sense of ownership, and how were you able to express that in Iran before you came to the US or even Canada?
It's a great question. Iran is such a hard country to grow up in, because of the pressure in the society and the government. But I was very fortunate to have the parents that I have, because I think I was 17 when I told my parents I'm never going to have kids. My parents were like, "Why?" I was like, "Because I don't think I can ever raise kids the way you did. Provide freedom, so I feel I have a choice, and I can learn from my mistakes. But there's a path. There are street lights for me to know where to go." It's like when I think about it, now that I'm like trained as a mentor and a coach, I'm like, they were the best coaches I could ask for. And so to answer your question, I was very fortunate that I have parents that helped me to get on that path. Like I remember my dad said, if you want to be a janitor, but be the best janitor in the city, and I'll be proud of you, whatever it is. But that comes with a disclaimer. I wanted to become an actress. My mom and the street lights got me to like Sheriff, which is the Stanford of back home, and then getting to like Ph.D. at my Georgia Tech. It was all my mom. So there's some things that are said and some things that are done.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. No, I mean, great philosophy, but in practice, it might have been a little bit different. I get that. Yeah.
For sure.
And another major influence in your life that you touched on earlier was your Ph.D. advisor, right?
Yes.
And I think especially when you're a driven and high ownership person, it's pretty rare that somebody can just kind of come along and just, change the trajectory of your life and keep going. So what was it about this person that caused them to have such a, meaningful and profound influence on you?
How many hours do we have? So many things come to mind. Let me start by saying that just a couple months ago, I was thinking about Dr. Cole, and I sent him a note, and I said, a thank you note. I was like, hey, how are you? And I said, thank you for investing in me. And he responded back and said, I don't know if I invested in you or more, you invested in me. That's the type of a person we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was doing my Ph.D., it's very much similar to what you just said earlier, that if it's a right fit, if your talent is understood, if someone understands how to leverage this beautiful talent, this energy, this sense of ownership, and where to place it. Each of us is a piece of puzzle, and we all are a perfect fit for another piece of puzzle. It's just that having that vision to understand someone and creating that environment that they will fit in the other, the perfect place that they need to be. It could be the role, it could be anything. And that's exactly what Dr. Cole did for me. During my PhD, I joined, a PhD student usually supposed to like research. I don't like research. I find it very boring. And if someone else can do it for me, please do. So what I ended up doing is he identified that before I knew it. And I ended up having 10 undergraduates. He had me as the first multidisciplinary mentor in the program at Georgia Tech. So it was a program from EE. I hope this is okay. I keep hitting this.
No, you'll be fine.
So we have EE had the program that the PhD students would partner with undergraduate students. So the PhD student would become a PhD advisor, and the undergraduate students would work as a PhD student, sort of working on the PhD level projects just to see if they like to go to grad school. And he put me on that. Even though I was a chemical engineer, I was the first person who went from chemical engineering. He made him put me in there. And I had this chemical and electrical engineer students work with me. And what I would do is that I would design experiments. So I was the creative mind behind it. I would come up with the experiment. I would design it. I will strategize who's going to do what. And I would just monitor the work being done and empower the students. Exactly. Empower the students and then gather the data, synthesize it, the analytical approach to it, and then come up. And that's how we ended up doing 20 plus publications and patents in 2.5 years. And my committee didn't let me graduate because they were like, 2.5 years, you cannot do your PhD in 2.5 years, and it's a different discipline. I was like, yeah, what else do you want me to do? So we ended up, my professor was like, Dr. Cole was like, hey, Mehrsa, just take a trip. So I went to the States, to Iran for 2 months. So I came back and then graduated after.
That sounds great. I mean, but what an opportunity. There's a lot of serendipity in that as well, right? I've just happening across the right person that can recognize your inherent talent and then cultivate those and pull those out of you. So you're doing a lot of mentorship now, right? So I guess some of that Dr. Cole legacy lives on in Mehrsa mentoring entrepreneurs today. What are you seeing with entrepreneurship right now? What are new startup founders doing? What are they excited about? What do you like to see? What do you not like to see? What's going on?
What I like to see more is kindness. My grandma always said, if you have a choice to be kind or to be right, always choose kind. And I think that would help a lot in business, in every aspect of it.
Oof. All right. I'm going to take that one a little bit personally, because there's many points in my life where I have the choice between being kind and being right. And I'm going to confess to you that I choose being right 90% of the time. But I'll work on that one.
Yeah, I think I have a picture of my grandma next to my screen. That what my mom says always, the unsaid can always be said. It's like trying to bite my tongue. when I really want to talk sometimes. Not that I want to talk, my emotions want to talk. I think that's a good time to pause.
Yeah.
But in the entrepreneurship world, I would love to see like what we're discussing about, like the founder day that Chris from Panage Ventures did yesterday.
Yeah.
I would love to see that more. The bringing the OGs and the new startup entrepreneurs, the startup founders and entrepreneurs together, because there's so much knowledge and experience that we can leverage. There are people who've been here before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have done fantastic work.
Yeah. And I think Vancouver being a small market, sometimes we're guilty of a bit of amnesia where we're chasing, there's still a little bit of an inferiority complex. It is a smaller market. And so we're looking to the next, looking to the new, and just moving on and being progressive to a fault almost. But yeah, the Founders Day, I do feel like they really did it right because they had almost like a heritage feel, intergenerationally, because it's like, okay, there's a legacy. We do actually have like ancestry almost that's in the room from people that have actually done some amazing and incredible things. And why wouldn't they still be a part of this community and continuing to share their story, right? But I do feel like that happens in some spaces that are a little bit smaller that kind of have this amnesia. But I think the way to counter that is through more sharing and storytelling. And that was a big theme of yesterday as well, was, in the realm of entrepreneurship, yes, being focused on your outcome, the impact you're trying to make, solving your problem, that's important. But sharing, bringing people along is important too, right? And they told those stories in very impactful ways. And sometimes people take, the kindness side, the sharing, the coming together, they take these as kind of like the bonus. It's the cherry on the top once you've kind of solved everything else. But they were able to actually point at San Francisco as a market, right? Where people are moving incredibly fast, but it feels almost open source because there's a shared understanding that execution's everything, right? So nobody's gatekeeping, nobody's really hiding a lot. Everybody's talking about everything because the assumption is that there's plenty to go around. And at the end of the day, it's whoever moves fast and executes well is going to win anyways.
Exactly.
So why gatekeep? Why try to be private? Why be siloed? There's no benefit in that, right? But in small markets, I think sometimes we fall into that habit a little bit. So, aside from attending Founders Day, how are you trying to break that up with the entrepreneurs you're working with? Like, do you still see some of that siloed thinking where they're really, a new entrepreneur or a new startup that you're working with, they're hyper-focused, which is necessary, but have you been able to sort of help them break down some of their own silos or maybe even curb some of those behaviors?
So some of the startups that I work with, they're in that 0 to
1.
Much closer to the 0.
Okay.
So they don't even know the entrepreneur community here. So it's all about getting them in the community, connect them with the other founders that are ahead of them or in the same industry, but been there, done that multiple times. So I'm doing that a lot for my mentees.
That sounds perfect because that's, just about the most impressionable place, right? Because you don't have a lot of hardened behaviors yet, right? Of somebody that's been a serial entrepreneur yet. So I feel like that's the right time to catch them. Yeah.
And getting to know the different stakeholders like government grant providers and the VCs, the super angels and angels, mentors, advisors. Like there's so many amazing people in this community that are willing to help and they have those resources to deploy. And you just have to make that connection again, like find that piece of puzzle, connect them and make sure that they have this, the rough edges are smoothened out and then fits right in.
So as you're an entrepreneur in residence at New Ventures BC.
Yeah.
So what's the thing that you find yourself saying all the time to early stage startup founders? Like what's the thing that's coming up time and time again?
Do you play poker? Do you know poker?
I play poker a little bit. I can't say I'm good at it by any means. And I can't say I have a poker face at all.
The first and best advice I got from one of my friends who was teaching me how to play poker. She said, don't ever fall in love with your hand. If you have pocket aces and that's not your flop, don't think twice, fold it. And that's what I say the most to my startup founders. Take that prejudice and that need to convince people this is the right idea and convince yourself that's the right idea. Take that away and don't fall in love with your idea. Don't fall in love with your business. Then that gives us that sense of reality to think, is this the right market? Is this the right customer? Is this the right solution? The second thing that I say the most, do you want to know?
Absolutely.
Everyone is an investor in a startup. We don't have founders. We don't have employees. We don't have advisors. We only have investors. The founders are the first investor of that business plan because you're investing your life into it. You could go work somewhere else and get paid a lot and not have a sleepless night, right? And you don't have employees because they're investing their career in you and your business plan and your ability to execute. So,
and they could be making more money elsewhere as well.
Absolutely. So I think if as founders have that hat on always to think that I'm an investor in this business plan and everyone else is an investor, and that having kindness versus being right, and then we're amazing founders then.
Wow. So kindness versus being right, for sure. Everybody's an investor, and don't fall in love with your business.
Don't fall in love with your hand.
Yeah, because the obvious implication of that is that your business will break your heart.
The thing is that, and don't fall in love with your hand, is at different stages. Sometimes you hire this CMO, you have this amazing, go-to-market strategy, and then we have this competition like ours. Raise $250 million in the same market. What are you going to do? Then don't fall in love with it. You got to change. You got to pivot.
Yeah.
So it applies to different stages and different things in the business.
Absolutely. Well, Mehrsa, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time and thanks for coming in. Where would somebody learn more about Mehrsa Raeiszadeh and everything that you have going on?
LinkedIn. I think I'm most active on LinkedIn if someone needs help or they want to reach out.
All right. We'll go find you on LinkedIn. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, hopefully we've given you a lot to think about. That was High Agency. Like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.